I have now the pleasure of inviting Dr. Daniela Dumbravă to deliver her speech. Among the automatism of the mental life of the moderns is this, I don't know if you are smokers, but even if you are not smokers, you may consider this epistemic topic, why, how, when people in the industry and smokers themselves have agreed to have only 20 cigarettes in a packet, and why scholars of every corner of the world agreed to have 20 minutes of a lecture with some 10 minutes of Q&A. So this templates of our not that conscious experience may at times help us to expand our own lucidity. I thank Daniela, long-time member, quasi founding member of the Romanian Association 30 years ago, a long-time supporter of these studies, where at the moment when we all were unemployed, the core group of the Institute. And I am very happy that you will speak to us about your dear topic of research, one of the best of our predecessors, Romanian-born scholars, Ioan Petru Culianu, who would have been 76 this year in January, but he died being 41. Besides this tremendously bad exit, he left us several major books, at that moment indeed influential, including also Magie dans la Renaissance, the books on Gnosticism from 1990 and 1991, the Tree of Gnosis especially, and the posthumous Otherworldly Journeys, published with Shambhala books, immediately after his assassination in Chicago. The Murder in Chicago, as Umberto Eco wrote in, if I'm not mistaken, in Times Literary Supplement or in the New Review of Books, I forgot. So, in an essay of 1995. So, with unpublished document, Daniela Dumbravă will present us anew the early days of the making of a scholar of religions coming from Moldavia and Wallachia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your generous presentation. Well, I'm a little bit ashamed because I've started to study Ioan Petru Culianu when I met the first step. My first step in Italy was for this reason, for this purpose. But I don't know, for whatever reasons, because I missed documents, because I just, when I have it, I try to reflect more on that, because I knew that he was killed and many people will, he attract attention for this reason. And I was a little bit reluctant to appear immediately with this material, which I'm very happy to share with you today. I will enter into the subject and then maybe we will discuss much more. So before he became a scholar, the young Culianu, it was a refugee at Latina. The paper reconstructs the legal and biographical profile of Ioan Petru Culianu as a political refugee under the 1951 Geneva Convention by triangulating three previously dispersed archival series: the Centro di Emigrazione of Latina, Archivio di Stato di Latina, the Romanian Securitate, l'Archivio, the Archive for National Documents of Study of Romanian Securitate, and the correspondence of the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Milan. Reading these documents through the legal architecture of 1951 Convention, and in particular the refugee camp or geographical reservation as a terminological, very international law terminological use that Italy maintained from 1964 until 1999. The paper argues that Culianu's dissidence cannot be reduced to a single category. It was once vocational, self-conscious, juridical, familial, collective, and existential. The newly inventoried Latina file does not merely supply chronology, it forces a redescription of dissident that anchors in it the everyday paperwork of refugee status, declarations, camp permits, clothing vouchers, renunciations, and reframe the image of the exiled historian of religions as the more austere figure of the recognized political refugee, reclaiming under Geneva the freedom of thought and the freedom of circulation of ideas. On 13 November 1972, in a clerical room of Administrazione per l'attività assistenziale italiane internazionali in Trieste, a 22-year-old Romanian graduate signed a bilingual Italian-Romanian form numbered 74120. I think I already put it on the. This is the photo of that 20 years old Culianu for the first time whenever I ever presented in public, and his the official document, his official registration. The signature is a slanting hand. He will not change for the rest of his life, reads Ioan Petru Culianu. The declaration above it, printed on government stationery, it's severe, it is rhetoric, it's and unsentimental in its detail. It records that the signatory, having requested political asylum in Italy, accept that assistance in the centers for foreign refugees is granted to him gratuitously by the Italian government through the AAI, through the Amministrazione per le attività assistenziali, okay, which sustains all expenses for his maintenance and for that of his family members cohabiting in the center, which was not the case. That he undertakes to observe a good moral and civic conduct in the center, that he will, with all solicitude, pursue his definitive resettlement in the country he has freely chosen, written by hand in capital letters in the box reserved for that purpose, Canada. So this was the form. Then the number was 7420. I think it's a number that should make a memory and history, because Culianu choose to be a political refugee, to be a refugee, because he just wanted to study history of religions. So 6 pieces of paper have come down to us from Trieste Latina file. The registration card, which is in 2 passport photographs and the autograph signature, the bilingual declaration of 13 November 1972. Maybe Vlad, you will help me to go to another slide, yes? And the certificate of recognition as a rifugiato politico in 30 January 1973, 7 autograph requests for permessi temporanei between February and May 1973, a clothing inventory, which is very interesting, of 19 February 1973, and the renuncia from the assistance of this assistance that he received on 30 September 1973, corrected by hand to record the settlement in Italy rather than the original projected Canadian destination. To this ones must add the letter of the UNHCR branch office for Italy in 10 April 1973, in which Prince Alfred Zurlipe Weissenfeld qualified Culianu ai sensi della Convenzione di Ginevra as a refugee tout court. In legal terms, what that means, this marked the beginning of the academic career of a scholar, which was later biography in Italy 72-78, in Netherlands 78-86, in Chicago 86-91, will be summarized as the curriculum of the Romanian disciple of Mircea Eliade with a kind of exhausted elegance. Since my subsequent analysis will focus on the status of refugee and dissident up until the time of Culianu's murder, that is up to 20 May 1991, as distinct from the term exile, I will demonstrate at the appropriate time, not today is just one part, but that we follow, that there are conceptual and epistemological elements that cannot support the idea of an Eliadian legacy in the forte sense, or in fourth sense. However, I will demonstrate the close connection with the Bianchi School of History of Religions. Ugo Bianchi was indeed Culianu's academic tutor and mentor. But today we are only at the Italy refugee stage, containing with what I have already written about this in an earlier article that was about the context of obtaining the passport, which was already published recently. The present paper proposed a different reading, that the Latina file, hitherto unstudied, allows us, indeed requires, to redefine Culianu's profile as a dissident by anchoring in it in the legal language of 1961 Convention. My method is both reconstructive and bidirectional. I read the Securitate files and the criminal files, the Bucharest Military Tribunal against the Latina files, and both against the legal text of 1961 Convention and 6075 Protocol as received by Italian domestic law. There are documents which I said that are against because he was prosecuted in Romania in absentia, and that's why it's needed to go to my earlier article. However, the section, the section 1 will describe the moment of registration, and then the architecture of the institutional architecture. The second section will reconstruct the legal framework, means that the conjunctive article in definition, the geographical limitation of Article 1b, it's very technical, but however it's important, was ratified in Italy in 1977, and it was abolished, the temporal limitation, but allowed the geographical one to survive. Well, briefly, if Culianu, when Culianu entered, he was an European, and he get the chance to be accepted as a political refugee in the base of this convention because he was European. But if he were Ethiopian, for example, this this wouldn't happen. So the Latina file is striking precisely because it is undeclarative. There is no manifesto in it, no manifesto of Culianu. So when he entered, didn't present himself as a political refugee, which is very important element for us. There is only the slow, patient, juridical literate work of a stateless young scholar who, with a Romanian university degree, the Romanian university will never release to him the documents. He refused to renounce to his vocation to and he became a historian of religion. That cost him a passport, country, friends, family, everything. And he was condemned, as I said, a 5-year sentence in absentia because he didn't turn back. So the Centro di Assistenza Profughi Stranieri of Trieste, where Culianu file was opened on 30 November 1972, was the first node of 3 stages architecture inherit from the immediate post-war years and consolidated under dual mandate of these institutions of immigration in Italy, created in 1947 within the Italian Ministry of the Interior, Amministrazione per le attività assistenziali italiane internazionali, administered the Italian state assistance to displaced persons, foreign refugees, and Italian repatriates. It owned its longevity less to legislative innovation than the bureaucratic continuity of personnel who had begun their careers under the wartime pontifical relief commission and continued under the intergovernmental and UN agency at the early Cold War. The Comitato Intergovernativo per le Migrazioni Europee, CIME, founded in Brussels in late 1961 as the successor of the Provisional Intergovernmental Committee for the Movement of Migrants for Europe, supplied the international counterpart of AAI It organized and financed the onward transfer of refugees from European camps to destination of resettlement, primarily in Canada, United States, Australia, and Argentina. In 1980s, CIME became transformed the institution Intergovernmental Committee for Migration, however. And then in 1989, the International Organization for Migration at the Latina camp shared premises and personnel. They joined MARC, and all this kind of information somehow appears on every paper of the files of the Culianu files. The signal of registration at Trieste was in legal logic, the moment in which the young Romanian graduate became a candidate for refugee recognition. So, and this convention from 1971 defined the refugee in conjunctive terms, not merely a person outside the country of his nationality, but a person who, owing the well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is unable or unwilling to avail himself of a protection of that country. It was absolutely not easy to become a refugee. The fear must be well-founded in a sense in which both the subjective and objective elements must be present. It must be of being persecuted in a cumulative sense of serious violation of human rights of a sustained or systematic nature, and it must be referable to one of the 5 convention grounds. So it was not at all easy to demonstrate that. But in November 1972, Culianu's case entered the Italian system, fitting this template with a precision that in retrospect seems almost premeditated. His refusal to return is the language of the Romanian Penal Code as it stood in 1972, the offense of refusing to return to Romania under the Article 263, the very offense of which 2 years later the Bucharest Military Tribunal would convict him in absentia. His vocational orientation, the history of religions in the tradition of Mircea, banned already then in the Romanian academic system, is structurally incompatible with the official cultural policy in the Romanian Socialist Republic. So for this reason, he was accepted. I mean, it's not so a joke, no? The convention, to understand what the Italian state did at November 1972, and again on 30 January 1973, when it received and recognized the young Culianu, we have to recover the legal text it was applying. Well, actually, I will publish all this material, and I propose to be much pragmatic, and I will promise to give you the paper immediately. I mean, I will publish it in a very short time, and you will have it. So Italy ratified the convention by a law in 1974, and it allowed to confine the burden of refugee protection to east-west frontier, and in particular to the Yugoslav border, then run a few hundred meters from the Trieste Centro itself. In 1960s and 1960s and 50 and 60, the overwhelming majority of asylum seekers in Italy were indeed Europeans, Yugoslavs, Hungarians after 1966, Czechs, Slovaks, and after 1968, Poles, Romanian, Bulgarians. In 1967, protocol signed in New York in 30 January 1967, it was a protocol which removed the temporal limitation altogether, which I said it is deliberately minimalist instrument drafted in the wake of Algerian war. And after the African decolonization, precisely in order to detach the convention from 1961 cut-off date. But this is the cruise. the 1967 protocol did not abolish the geographical limitation already declared by states parties in 1961 convention. So it was adopted. Italy acceded to the 1967 protocol, and that is the reason that it's not a marginal, it's not a technically marginal element. It was the legal universe within which Culianu was recognized in January 1973 as a rifugiato politico. So his Romanian nationality, duly recorded in the Trieste registration card, in the certificate, yes, placed him squarely within the European scope of Italy declaration. Had he been, say, an Ethiopian flying in the Derg in 1974, the same Italian state would not have recognized him. So the geographical limitation was finally lifted. And okay, on January 1973, the date stamped, Culianu, we have here the documentation, and I will present you, even if it is a little bit boring, but everything I said, it is based on the document that I try to quote, but I said to you that I will give you the paper and it will be much more easy to follow. I'm sorry I didn't share with you today, but I didn't have the condition to print the papers. So Culianu was transferred from Trieste to Centro Emigrazione of Latina, the second of the three nodes of the system. The Latina camp opened in 1967 in a complex barracks south of the city, which is very, very important. Please pay attention to this. So he ended up in a complex of barracks, south of the city, and now after 1981 as the Centro Rossi Longhi, had by the early 1970s become the principal recognition hub for refugees for the Soviet bloc. Romanians, Czechoslovakians, Hungarians, Soviet Jews in transit, etc. And on that day, in his arrival, Culianu was assigned to Blocko F8, room F3073, Mensa F3073. Well, this is absolutely historical because soon after that, and you will see it, I have another element to give you, to reconstruct the atmosphere when Culianu ended up in this, in Latina. It was very near to his very day when he tried to commit suicide. On that day, the magazzinier of Centro the cloth distributing man, okay, offers him under the autograph signature the standard clothing kit of a single male refugee: one jacket, one pair of trousers, one shirt, two pairs of socks, two pairs of underwear, one woolen jumper, one overcoat, one two-piece suit. And the voucher is stamped number 1, 2, and 22. The numerical sobriety of this inventory is by itself a moral document. And this is the very moment when actually it creates emotion to me, because I really project myself in at that moment, and I understand why Culianu was. His attempt to commit suicide was very, very real. But I embraced the Teresa Culianu thesis about Nechia, so we will speak about. And it is hard to look at this list without remembering the famous claim in Culianu's later papers in cognitive history that the only universal thing is poverty. Here in 1973, the universality has the shape of two-piece suit lodged in a card the size of a postcard. And there is a letter in a page of slide 10, and I will present it. Well, he slowly tried to go out to have 7 autograph richieste di permesso to get out from the camp and to travel to Rome, to Perugia. He win a fellowship in University per gli stranieri, Università degli Stranieri di Perugia for his talent in Italian language, and he compete with many students and so on and so forth. Sometimes he was very friendly hospitality of the, he received a sort of hospitality in a very strange place in Rome, which is in Forum Traianum, in the middle, in the heart of Rome, to the Società Academica Romana. I have to discover much more about this society because it's not so orthodox. Because my hypothesis is that it was rather for the exiles, not for the refugees. I mean, what that means? That means that many Romanians, including Mircea Eliade, were exiled. They considered themselves exiled because they left Romania and they lived in France or in United States, but they didn't ask the status of refugee. They didn't, I mean, they have their own drama, of course. They have, but they were in the meantime subject of legionary movements, and it was a group, and it was, by the way, everything under the another kind of institution which was created after the Second World War, the National Committee for the Exiles, Romanian exiles, and it's completely other world, and that's why I think it's a shift. It is an important shift between the term exile and the refugee. Culianu is another kind of category. We can't compare it. However, and this society was, from my point of view, and my humble researches, it was under the supervision of the Securitate. And it is Fundația Drăgan. Many colleagues of my colleagues knows very well the story of Fundația, of this Drăgan, who is a personage, millionaire who made a lot of money with oil, gas, and in Italy, and so on and so forth. And at the beginning, he received all the people, all the academia, even Turdeanu, all the Romanians which were brilliant, were under this society. So when Culianu came, when Culianu tried to visit them, and he was doing that because he was advised by Eliade. Okay, so this is important. It is to keep it in mind. So at a certain moment, Culianu asked to, but being helped by this Società Academica Romana, he obtained many possibilities and permits to get out, and to obtain suddenly permesso di lavoro in Italy. I tried to make it short, but I really want to turn a little bit back to the atmosphere of Culianu, because he described it in a letter, which we have it on the display. My dear ones, I'm writing to let you know that I'm alive. Well, it is in Romanian, the letter, but I will read it in English. And I ask you to forgive me for rarely getting in touch. He was depressed. I usually live somewhat isolated from others, and I don't really have any big news to share with you. It is in a huge contrast with all the correspondence that he had with the family. And by the way, all these letters, I found it in the Securitate files because were intercepted. Okay, this is another element which is important. So don't write me at Perugia, because about me, and don't write to me at Perugia, because I'm still in Rome, still waiting to leave. Write to grandma in Paris. It is code language. Is not. I didn't thought that his grandma was living in Paris, but it is about another thing. And tell her that if I were to come, I wouldn't stay longer, because I have many friends. Lately, I've been studying Chinese acupuncture theory. I mean, in the lager in Latina, and many other things. And I ask you to hope with me, and in me, and not to grieve for me, no matter how hard things might be for me, which isn't the case. It would be much harsher for me if I know that you aren't. It will be much easier for me if I know you aren't suffering. So he was taking care of his family, being himself in a very harsh situation. It is a huge contrast. However, yeah, it is interesting, this letter. I find it. And reading it in the Securitate file, it creates some impression, yeah. Well, I don't know how much, I mean, I have 28 pages and I'm in the middle, but look, there is another letter, very interesting one. When he tried to explain to the Securitate, he knew that his letter will be obviously read by the Securitate. And he finally obtained a borsa di studio in Cattolica di Milano with the competition, and because he was a refugee. It is important as well. I mean, I discovered that he wouldn't be allowed to compete for this fellowship in Milano, which is for the first time that someone knows about, without this refugee status, and about the status of someone which has the residence already, permesso di soggiorno, in Italy. Yeah, I will conclude. And so he tried to explain the reasons that he wants to stay with the history of religion, to be a scholar, and he wants to protect his family because he knew it very well, the situation. I will conclude, yeah. Well,
Because
first of all, I
sorry.
promise that I will give you all the paper, but Teresa Culianu Petrescu has written that her brother, the descendant into Nechia, was followed by a sort of comeback, stronger than himself, and I pay credit to this. The Latina file allows us to add the comeback was not, first of all, a literary one. It was not just literature or juridical one. It accomplished through forms, declaration, the demissions, letters, and renunciation. And the historian of religious will later write these wonderful volumes, Eros and Magie in Renaissance. Out of these words, Theognosis, and we have all this beautiful mind because he was protected at that time by this Geneva Convention of 1961. Sometimes you might say that this is not important, but it is indeed. And he was accepted, and he motivated, even with Securitate and with the official instance, legal instance in Italy, that he wants to become a scholar. He wants to become a historian of religions, and there are no reason to punish him. There are reason to protect him and to help him. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, dear Daniela, for the unpublished documents. And just the historical note on that Fondazione Dragan Nagard, it was indeed supported by the legionaries already from the late 1940s. And then it was the national communists which, for the first time, included all the fascist topics for the history of Romania, etc.